I've been on YouTube making content for roughly 6 years at this point. Now, when I say it out loud, that's kind of scary. Like, so much has happened and so much has changed, both inside and out of the platform. Now, what some of you might not know is that years ago, when I first got started, I made this channel with 2 goals in mind. This was to act as a way for me to practice my optimism, so I would talk about the kind of games that I was passionate about and why I loved them. Even if I were talking about a game that I didn't like, I would still make it a point to focus on all of the things I felt that game got right. See, I was going through a bit of a depressive spell at the time, and my former partner convinced me to give this YouTube thing a shot as a way to train myself to think more positively. And hey, what do you know? Here I am. The other reason, the more interesting reason, was to be able to potentially shine some light on the games I feel are often overlooked and forgotten. See, there's something to be said when you find something that's obscure that speaks to you. It feels precious, as if the fact that not many people know about this game's existence means that it was made specifically for you. My train of thought was, and still is, that if I found something that speaks to me, or, something that feels special to me, then it's only natural that I would want to share that with as many people as possible. Is it to make sure that some works of art are immortalized, or maybe I can introduce someone to a game that they need in their life at a crucial moment? Like maybe it's a game that has some sort of message that can help them carry on, or maybe it's just a really cool hidden gem that doesn't get the love or attention that it deserves. See, there's not one definitive answer as to why I like to talk about these weird, smaller games. Now, granted, I've talked about some games that were recent releases, and even now, you guys caught me in the middle of a 3D Zelda retrospective, consisting of some of the most well-known, well-received, and most important games that help shape the industry into what it is today. Like I said earlier, a lot has changed ever since I started YouTube. Now, with that being said, one thing has remained consistent from when I first started and even up till now. See, there's been a series of games that, while flawed in some areas, hits every note that matters to me perfectly. We all play games for different reasons, and we all find value in different things. Mario, for example, is more often than not formulaic, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Every platform, every enemy, every coin placement feels deliberate, and a lot of people eat that right up. But if you've seen any of my previous videos, then you would know that what I value most about a video game, I care about the journey that I go on while playing the game, the adventure, the crazy over-the-top places, the bizarre scenarios, the organic environment design, the people who make up the world of the game, things like that. None have been able to intrigue me as much as a little developer known as Sonic Software Planning, or as they're known now, Camelot Software Planning. With the likes of the Shining series and Beyond the Beyond to an extent, they took established fantasy tropes that you'd find in your typical JRPG and expanded upon them by adding creatures found in various mythologies and mixing things up with a pinch of science fiction. It's hard to explain, but there's something very distinct about these games. Like, these games are written in such a weird way and have a strange yet charming sense of humor. Games from Camelot may seem like generic fantasy JRPGs at a first glance, but actually sitting down and playing these games shows that they have a bit more going on than you'd initially think. They have their own identity, where I'm playing a game and I think to myself, yeah, I'm playing a game by Camelot. Nice. Now, I'm not trying to overhype these games by saying that, but that's genuinely how I feel. They're not as well known or as recognized as some of the games from Squaresoft during their golden age, but something like the Shining series by Camelot doesn't deserve to be slept on. I love Camelot Software Planning, and I feel as if the JRPGs that they've made deserve a lot more credit. And today, I want to shed some light on what I consider to be their absolute best work. A game that got a start on the Nintendo 64, but then was moved to the Game Boy Advance. A game that was so ambitious that it got split into 2 games due to hardware limitations and time restraints. A game that, 20 years later, still retains that classic Camelot magic. This is a little game called Golden Sun. That's right, folks, I'm talking about Golden Sun again. Despite how bleak the future looks for this series, well, with this last game coming out in 2010, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop talking about this game. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you want me to stop, then you gotta tell Camelot to make a damn good game. Or a remake of Golden Sun. I'll take that too. And you heard correctly, this game is 20 years old, which means that the video I made back in 2016 is already 5 years old. Christ. That's actually part of the reason why you're seeing this. Like, I know it may seem redundant having 2 Golden Sun reviews on my channel, but, I mean, come on, cut me some slack. Like, that video had stretched out GBA GameCube footage in 480p and piss poor mic quality, and it's still somehow my most watched review. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, I appreciate it, but it's a little embarrassing to see how low quality that video is nowadays. And seeing how Nintendo and Camelot don't appear to be doing anything to celebrate this game's anniversary, again, I figured I'd take it upon myself to go in detail as to why myself and many others love this game to the extent that we do. Again. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the first thing that I want to correct is how the game looks. In my older video, I said that the game looked fine, but back when I first played the game, I would play it on the TV with the GameCube's GBA adapter, which makes the game look way more pixelated than it should be. But when you're playing this game on the screen that it was intended for, it looks so damn good, especially considering that this game launched within the GBA's first year. There's a weird wannabe 3D thing that's going on here. Kind of reminds me of what Rare did with the Donkey Kong Country games on the Super Nintendo, where the sprites are really 2D renders of 3D models. Now, I don't know if Camelot did this with the Golden Sun sprites. If anyone knows, feel free to let me know. But the sprite work in this game is incredibly detailed for a 2001 GBA title. The animation of this game is pretty great too. Like, looking back on the likes of the Shining games from Sega and Beyond the Beyond, you can tell that they've come a long way, and they gave this game everything they had. There's always something moving that catches the eye, and this is especially true in the battles. See, in other games, you and your opponent will just be standing there in place, getting lost in each other's eyes, but the battle sprites in this game actually animate, and given the detail and complexity in the character and monster designs, the animations are quite impressive. And that's not even bringing up how the camera shifts and moves around during the battles, adding more to that 3D illusion, or how incredible some of these attacks looks with the insane amount of particle effects that fly around. We'll talk a bit more about that later on in the video. Got some more to say, but just keep that in the back of your head. Golden Sun is a beautiful looking game, and it helps that the sound, for the most part, is top notch. The sound design of Golden Sun helps add weight and impact to what you're doing. From the noise that it makes from when you jump from platform to platform, to the chatter noise that comes up when people talk, or when you fell an enemy and they let out one last cry as they fade into dust, the sound design in Golden Sun makes it feel as if every action that you take, despite how minuscule, feel as if there's a lot of weight to it. The only issue that I have in this game sound is when you get a Venus or a Mars in, it plays this super obnoxious sound that it's like it's rubbing sandpaper in your eardrums. Now, in all fairness, the Game Boy Advance was very infamous for having poor audio quality. There's a lot of games that sound really good on the GBA, don't get me wrong, but a lot of games sound very, which makes it all the more impressive that the sound design in Golden Sun is as good as it is. Even more than that, the music in this game is stellar. I've said it time and time again. Both Golden Sun and The Lost Age are two of the best sounding games you'll find on the Game Boy Advance, and I still have yet to be proven wrong. It's been said that the GBA felt a lot like a portable Super Nintendo, and with the amount of SNES ports that were made for the GBA, it's easy to understand why so many people say this. One thing these ports could never replicate, however, was the sound quality, especially in the music department. Go back to that last example, you know what I mean? Ugh. Now, maybe I'm just biased, I'm open to admit that, but the Golden Sun games have that kind of quality that's missing in so many other ports. I also noticed that some games share similar sound fonts with the Game Boy Advance, so when you're playing Mother 3, and you think to yourself that some of these instruments sound familiar, you'll then realize that you've heard these same exact instruments in the Gen 3 Pokemon games, but that's not the case with the Golden Sun games. These two games sound distinct, and it helps give these games an identity. Okay, well maybe that's not entirely true, because the Game Boy Advance Mario Sports games use a very similar sound font, but then again, both of these franchises' soundtracks were composed by none other than the man, the myth, the legend, my boy Motoi Sakuraba, my favorite composer for video game music, really one of my favorite musicians of all time. He's a legend. The soundtracks for both of these games are incredibly diverse. You have tracks that carry an ominous tone, or others are super cheerful and energetic, and then you have absolute bangers like the battle music. There's actually a really good video about the music of Golden Sun. I'll post the link in the description. It's a damn good video, and this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. I don't really know much when it comes to music. I just like the things that sound good, I'm an easy guy to please. I just feel that the music in this game makes everything that you do feel much more impactful, and the expert sound design packs a punch that makes the player feel good. So everything I previously mentioned was about the surface level content of Golden Sun, the way how it looks, the way how it sounds, but what about the actual world of Golden Sun? Well, this story takes place in the world of Weird, where essentially the Earth is flat. There you go, flat earthers, you got one. Long ago, the power of alchemy thrived through synergy, and the people who inhabited this world used it as a part of their everyday lives. People from around the world have their own usage and terminologies for synergy, and this is something that we even get to see in-game. But it wouldn't be long until this power fell into the wrong hands, and in time, entire wars were waged in the hopes of obtaining limitless power. As the world was on the brink of destruction, warriors sealed away alchemy with the 4 elemental lighthouses scattered throughout the entire world. If one were to reawaken the power of alchemy, they would need to use the 4 elemental stars, 4 sacred treasures that houses one of the 4 elements: earth, water, wind, and fire. Completely original stuff, I know. These treasures were guarded in the Soul Sanctum inside Mount Aleph. The protectors live on the base of the mountain in a small village known as Vale, and this is where our story begins. Now, it's a common trope for RPGs and JRPGs to start out in a safer environment, usually with the main character waking up and getting a taste of the tone of the story and a taste of the world that they're about to explore. Golden Sun does this, but with a bit of a twist. Instead of having the main character wake up to get ready for a carnival or something fun like that, we wake up to find out that our village is on the brink of ruin. Our town is being bombarded with these giant boulders being hurled from the mountain, destroying houses and bridges. One massive boulder is barely being held at bay thanks to the villagers using the power of synergy. A young boy somehow ended up in a river with a violent current, barely being able to hold on for dear life. We eventually find someone to help him out of the river, but by that point, it's too late. Everyone is in total shock. A little girl just lost both of her parents and her brother right in front of her eyes, and we just lost our father. So we go back to the village square to see if there's anyone who could help us recover the bodies, but then we're confronted by the antagonists, Sitaris and Bernardi. Now, as it turns out, they went inside the Soul Sanctum with a number of people from their clan, and they were the ones who caused the storm. Someone sprung a trap, and these two were the only remaining survivors. They spot us and are very quick to take us out. Our heroes lay unconscious in the rain, the 2 villains escape the scene, leaving the town in a near-ruined state, and then we get that title drop. God damn, dude. Like, talk about an introduction. It's common for JRPGs to have poor pacing and to lose people towards the beginning of the game for a number of reasons. Like, maybe the intro is too boring, or maybe it's too slow, or takes too long, or maybe they try to throw too many things at you too fast, whatever the case. But this game shows you exactly how it's supposed to be done. We're thrown right in the middle of disaster, so already the tension is high. We get a taste of what the world is like and what the people who inhabit this world can do. We get a taste of combat. We're shown how threatening the antagonists are. All of this within the span of like 15 minutes. Now, having said that, I think it's time that I mention one of my biggest problems with Golden Sun, that being the poor pacing of its narrative. Right after that perfect introduction, this poor pacing creeps up almost immediately after. Characters are often chatty, and they usually don't have anything interesting to say or to add to the discussion. Like, I remember reading somewhere that this is just Camelot's weird sense of humor. Like, you're supposed to think, oh wow, they just keep going, they just keep talking. That's kind of funny, but like, it's not, and honestly, it kind of kills the pacing of your story. Like, it takes what would have been a really cool idea, and it just kind of makes them boring. And that's a shame. Honestly, it doesn't help that the story itself isn't anything to write home about. See, Isaac, Garrett, and Jenna want to learn how to use synergy, essentially this game's equivalent to magic, to make sure that what happened 3 years ago wouldn't happen again. So they've been learning under the scholar Kraden, and eventually, we end up in our first dungeon, the Soul Sanctum. A few puzzles here, a few mazes later, we find ourselves in front of the very elemental stars themselves, but we're followed by the antagonist from before. And as it turns out, that little boy in the river, Felix, somehow survived, yet for some reason, he's aiding the antagonists. They take Jenna and Kraden hostage, they steal 3 of the 4 elemental stars, and they leave 2 boys in a volcano that's about to erupt. We make our escape, we explain to the village elder what happened, and then we learn what will happen if Sitaris and Bernardi ignite the lighthouses. This is essentially our quest. We gotta stop the 2 villains from relighting the lighthouses and bring back Jenna, Kraden, and Felix. It's a simple story that's otherwise unoffensive with some really cool ideas, but I got a few gripes and I got a few questions. First of all, Kraden talks about this thing called the Stone of the Sages, yet between this and the Lost Age, to my knowledge anyways, it's never brought up again. So I don't know what the Stone of the Sages is supposed to be. Unless if it's supposed to be the wise one. Like, I mean, he's a big old rock with a big old eyeball, so, you know, he's pretty much like the god of the game. So is this what he's talking about? I don't know. It's not really explained that well, or at least I don't think it is. If I'm wrong, you know, correct me. Also, there's this guy, Alex. We don't know squat about him, yet it's implied that he's the overarching antagonist of the entire series. Like, he's the one pulling the strings, yet in this game, he doesn't ever do anything. His motivations are unclear, and we don't even get a boss battle with him, so as far as I'm concerned, in this game, he's a pretty weak antagonist. Felix is kind of the same way. You only see him a few times, and it always equates to him going, "Oh, so you followed us, huh? The lighthouses have to be lit, but I'm not going to tell you why." Bye! Similar to Alex, we're never given a reason to care. You know, he's just doing the thing that we're trying to stop, but I felt no motivation to stop him, you know? Like, there's no boss battle, he has very little presence, it feels weak. Maybe in the case of Felix, like, that was kind of the point. For, like, towards the end, Sataris makes it a point to tell off Felix in front of everybody that he's weak, and that he stands no chance against him. But maybe if this happened earlier, like in the midway point, and then the climax, he does something to prove that he's not as weak as Sataris said, then that would have been much more effective. Oh shit, like, okay, so imagine this, like, you know, at the confrontation in the Mercury Lighthouse, instead of fighting Sataris, he and Minardi forced Felix and Jenna to fight your party as like a test of loyalty, you know? Like, it would give you even more of a reason to hate Sataris and Minardi. Come on. Don't tell me that wouldn't be cool, because that's pretty fucking cool. One thing I will give this game credit for is that the motivations for the party members are quite varied. Like, it's not just them going, oh, well, you know, we gotta stop the lighthouse from being lit because we gotta save the world, guys. No, like, Isaac and Garrett want their friends back. Ivan wants to help Isaac and Co. as a way of saying thanks for helping him retrieve his master's rod from a group of thieves. And Mia joins the party because she was supposed to watch over the Mercury Lighthouse and protect it. Well, seeing how it got lit up, she kind of failed, so she joins the group as a form of atonement. Now, granted, they don't have the most complicated motivations, but they are, at the very least, personal motives. My issue with the story of Golden Sun is that there's a lot of really cool ideas here, but they don't ever do anything with them. Again, like as far as the main story is concerned anyways. But what saves the story for me is the actual world and the adventure aspect of this game. So the narrative of this game is kind of bland, but every town that you go to has something weird going on, and this is part of what kept me going. See, Mount Aleph erupted, and it caused these Synergy Stones to be flung all over the world. Now, in-game, these Synergy Stones let the party refill their Synergy points, but for the story, they cause all sorts of weird shit to happen. Early on, for example, you'll reach this town of Bilibin, where at the entrance, you'll find this tree that's kind of shaped like a man, and as it turns out, you could read its mind and find out that the people of the village to the west have been turned into trees. Bilibin has a mayor who's married to a woman who's completely full of herself, with a giant golden statue in the center of the town, and now she's demanding that she have a mansion built using the wood from the sacred tree known as Tret. Tret, understandably, becomes furious and turns the lumberjacks into trees. However, a Synergy Stone fell into his branches, and that power made the darkness in his heart overwhelm him, and as such, he's now dying a slow death. And if Tret dies, so do the people who were turned into trees. Also, as it turns out, there were once creatures who lived and thrived in the forest, and they've been turned into monsters. And, you know, we've been, yeah. Wow, that's actually kind of heavy. Holy shit. There's also this forest not too far away from Tret that sprouted out of nowhere thanks to the Synergy Stones, and it kind of acts as this game's equivalent to the Lost Woods from the Zelda game. It's the forest maze dungeon where you make one wrong turn and you get lost, you know? Once you pass that forest, you'll bump into this girl, Feiji, who can see into the future thanks to these Synergy Stones. Her explanation's always been funny to me. Like, he just bluntly explains that she got smacked in the head by one of these rocks. Like, I don't know why I find it funny, but I just do. Like I said before, I'm an easy man to please. So yeah, I think it's actually really cool how these disposable items for a party actually has a huge impact on the world. Something so small for us can cause all sorts of weird things to happen. But even in the towns that don't involve Synergy Stones still has a lot going on, too. Like for me, my favorite town in the game is Tolby. Now, first of all, getting here is a lot of fun. Like, you're on this boat that goes from one side of this massive lake to another, and the boat is constantly being attacked by these monsters, and these monsters will go after the people rowing the boat. So when one of the oarsmen goes down, you have to handpick one of the passengers to row the boat. The power that you have here, it is something else. You can read their minds and feel their fear. Like, oh, what's that, Gramps? There's no way we make an old man like you row the boat, huh? Oh, yes, we would. Get your ass down there. Oh, you think that just because you're a woman means that you shouldn't have to do the work that men do? Guess what, lady? Equal rights. Get your ass down there. But look, like, some of these people might have even enjoyed it. See, like, this girl liked it and she got buff. Like, yeah, good for you. Depending on who you have row the boat, you can even access a late game optional dungeon, but we'll talk about that later on. So, yeah, that's fun. But when you actually get to Tolby, oh man, like, I love this place. Like, you got this fountain where you can throw these lucky medals and get cool rewards like powerful weapons and armor and accessories, which is always fun. You got this really cool dice mini game where you can win gold, and these dice physics are pretty legit. Like, I'm not gonna lie, these are really cool. And then you have these lovely slot machines that I hate oh so very much, but I gotta get them hyper boots. Why? Well, I mean, you'll find out, like, later. And by that, I mean, like, later. By, like, a lot later, so Tolby's just a really fun town. There's a lot to do here. After you clear the dungeon that's a little up north of Tolby, you get to participate in the Colossal event, where you have to make your way through this obstacle course and battle your opponent to a duel. However, you can put members of your party to specific parts of the map, and you can use their abilities to give you an advantage. Like, what other game lets you do this? Tolby's a great town. It's one of my personal favorite towns in any JRPG. Like, give me more towns like this where I could do these kind of fun things. Like, I don't know why more games don't have these kind of towns. Like, Pokemon has, like, the Game Corner, but, like, that's it. Like, I want more towns like that, you know? I also didn't realize how much of the stuff was optional in this game. Like, for a while, going back to Bilibin for an example here, I thought that you'd have to talk to the mayor in order to progress, but you can actually just run into Bilibin, rest at the inn, get some gear, and be on your merry way, you know, skipping an entire conversation. And even then, like, once when you've cleared the conflict of whatever town that you're in, you can actually go back to the person in charge, and they'll reward you with some treasure. Like, damn. Like, I'm so used to games, especially like Nintendo games, being linear and handholdy, but Golden Sun is a fairly open-ended JRPG. I wouldn't go as far to say that it's an open world game, but it's not as restrictive like some other more recent example of Nintendo JRPGs. The go-to example that a lot of people use to explain Golden Sun's kind of open-endedness, well, we're going back to Bilibin again for an example. Like, you get told they have to head towards Tret immediately, but you can actually go to the Mercury Lighthouse and get a new party member and clear that dungeon. It'll be difficult, sure, like even getting there can be pretty hard if you get the wrong encounter, but I think it's really cool they can make that choice on your own. Going this way also makes the game a lot less backtrack heavy. You're going to be needing the Hermes water they get from the lighthouse to get to Tret in order to progress, so if you go in the way and the game nudges you, you're going to be backtracking quite a bit. Admittedly, this is another problem that I have with the game. The backtracking sucks and there's no way to fast travel. Like, there's no spell, no item, nothing. So if you forgot something important, you're going to be trekking on foot, and you bet your butt it's going to be taking a while, especially with the random encounters. But on that note, I think the overworld is tightly designed. Like, at first it seems huge, and in fairness, it is pretty large, but there comes a point where you see how everything connects, and it's very smart. You'll find a number of shortcuts sprinkled throughout the entire world, and even in some of the mini-dungeons that connect from one region to another, there's a lot of shortcuts here, so you don't have to do the whole entire mini-dungeon over again. So while the lack of fast travel is a genuine problem, I hardly mind thanks to the overworld being as tightly designed as it is. What really made me appreciate the overworld design was right before you reach the docks. If you go up north, you'll be right back into Vale, and you even get touching scenes where Garrett catches up with his family, and Isaac gets to talk to his mother who has fallen ill. It also goes into what I was talking about when it comes to these missable scenes. You know, something like this is so easy to miss, yet every time I play this game, I always make it a point to stop and say hi to Mama. It's like at this point, you've already done so much and you're about to reach the halfway point of the game, so it's nice to make one last stop before you go out towards the point of the game where it gets more difficult. But on that note, this game doesn't always do a great job of pointing you to where you need to go, and with the game being fairly open, well, I'm sure you can see how this can actually be a pretty big problem. You can go out of your way to talk to NPCs or read their minds with Synergy, and some can nudge you in the right direction, but the way forward should have been a bit more clear-cut, especially with how many of these scenes are actually missable. Oh, dude, but being able to read minds, though, like, this is one of the coolest things about this game. Like, there are some characters who are a bit more in touch with Synergy than you'd think, and then when you try to read their mind, they'll actually catch you and call you out on it. Like, that's pretty cool. But then there's everyone else, and this is where I think a lot of the charm can be found. Like, when you read the minds of the people who have been turned into trees, you get to understand how everyone feels, but some people are actually kind of okay with it. Like, you got this one person who thinks they look cute as a tree. Like, yeah, go confidence. Actually, now that I have you all here, I've actually prepared a haiku for you, and it was actually inspired by this game. Now, I usually don't fancy myself a poet, but I'm actually kind of proud of this one, so here we go. If we were all trees, there would not be any war, because we'd be trees. I love this game. I've already brought up the dungeons a few times already, so now I think it's actually time that we talk about them. It's very common for dungeons in a JRPG just to be like a bunch of rooms where you fight mooks. Like, in most cases, you don't have to think about where you're going or what you're doing, you just gotta make your way to the end of the dungeon and face off against the dungeon's boss, if there even is one. Now, maybe if the developer is feeling ballsy, they'll have a maze or a really simple switch puzzle or something like that, but in Golden Sun, that's not the case. A lot of the dungeons in this game have similar puzzles that you'd find in like an earlier 2D Zelda game. Not in the sense where you'd find an item and use that item to get through the rest of the dungeon, but more like the quality of the puzzles that you find here are up to snuff with Zelda puzzles, if that makes any sense. I mean, yeah, like there's a lot of puzzles in this game where all you do is like you push around a log or a block, or you have to jump along a series of platforms, but I found that in a lot of cases, the context of how you're doing these things is different almost every time. Like in the Mercury Lighthouse, for example, you have a lot of these puzzles where you have to hop across some water. You step on a glowing tile, and then you're given 3 steps to get to where you need to go. Otherwise, if you fail, you'd have to start over from that previous tile. It takes something so simple that you've been doing mindlessly at the beginning of the game, and now it requires you to actually pay attention and plan ahead. Or in the case of the Venus Lighthouse, for example, you have a lot of block pushing puzzles, which a lot of you are going to roll your eyes at, but you have these challenges where you have to push the blocks in the right places in order to open the way forward. Again, like, it takes something that you normally wouldn't put much thought into, and now it demands your focus and attention. I found that the puzzles get a lot more interesting in the optional dungeons. Like, the Lupa Fortress has always been a highlight for me. You have to turn invisible and sneak past the guards of the cave, but if you get caught in the spotlight, you'll be spotted and thrown out. It's a stealth section, so I feel compelled to hate it, but for one, the dungeon isn't long enough to where I feel like as if I'm wasting my time, and two, the dungeon itself is well designed. Like, there's plenty of moments where you can fight some unsuspecting guards, your movement isn't ever hampered, there's a really fun boss at the end, it's a solid dungeon. There's also the Crossbone Aisle, a massive dungeon packed with the most powerful enemies in the game and some of the most clever puzzles that you'll find. It puts all of the synergy that you've learned and acquired to the test, and with proper use, you can get all the chests that contain some of the most powerful gear and weapons. You even get to face off with Deadbeard, this game's super boss. It's kind of a weird design, but it's an intense fight nonetheless. Now, what makes these dungeons work for me is the use of synergy. Golden Sun is a game where you are constantly interacting with the environment in one way or another. Whether it's turning invisible to avoid being spotted, or grabbing things from beyond a jail cell, or, moving that block that you just can't reach, or uncovering invisible secrets. You do a lot of these kind of things in Golden Sun, and I love it. The dungeon design requires interacting with the environment. It's because of this I'm always engaged, especially when there's like a Djinni around. Spotting these is a lot like finding a heart container in a Zelda game for me. Like, if I see it, I need to get it as soon as possible. You can find these in towns and in dungeons, but even in parts of the overworld. Now, I know that sounds atrocious, seeing how this game has random encounters, but the thing is that the locations of these Djinn are set no matter what. They're usually found in weird, out-of-the-way parts of the map, and their encounter rate is actually pretty high. It's just another reason for me to praise the design of this overworld. The Djinn encourage exploration, and thanks to their high encounter rate, it's never a waste of your time. Now, as for what the Djinn actually do, well, let's get into it then. Each member of your team is aligned to one of the 4 elements: earth, water, wind, or fire, or in this game's terms, it would be Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, or Mars. Out there, you'll find Djinn that match these elements, so if you give a Djinn to the corresponding character, they're going to get a pretty significant boost to their stats and learn new synergy from that element. So, in layman's terms, giving an Earth Djinn to your Earth character is going to make that character stronger. Each Djinn also has a use in battle. Some can stun an enemy or regain health for your party, some can let you attack first, some can increase your attack or defense. However, by using the Djinn in battle, let's say it'll deactivate that Djinn. So the stats and spells that you gain from that Djinn that you just used are now gone. But here's the fun thing. Using that Djinn is also how you unleash summons. There are 4 tiers of elemental summons, with the 4th tier being home to some of the coolest summons in the game. And just to add salt to the wound, after you summon, your elemental power will increase, meaning that your elemental spells just hit much, much harder. Something else you can do with the Djinn, which I feel as if this game doesn't do the greatest job of telling you, is that you can mix and match the Djinn whose elements are different from the designated party member. So if you give Isaac a Mars Djinn, for example, his class will change, meaning that his stats will go all over the place, but he can learn class-specific synergy. Now, I don't ever play this way. I've always done the more let's say pure way, for lack of a better term. My issue with the class system is that they don't really encourage you to experiment with the other classes, But with that said, the fact that it's even here at all is really cool, and I know some people who actually go really in-depth with the classes. Point is, the Djinn is part of what sets Golden Sun apart from other JRPGs. You don't need like a weird item to unlock new classes like in Trials of Mana. Like, you don't do any of that nonsense. Like, as long as you have the Djinn, you can switch classes at any time. And their use in battle also provides a risk versus reward style of play. Like, I remember my first time playing through this game and Dark Dawn, I never used the Djinn, and I relied on the buffs from spells and synergy, but then I played the Lost Age for the first time, and then I used the Djinn, and that's when I realized what they can really do. So I went back and played through this game with the Djinn, and I had a completely different experience. The Djinn brings in a lot of customization. You can play the game how you want to play. Nothing is ever forced on you, and that's something that a surprising amount of JRPGs get wrong. And seeing how we've already talked about combat a little bit, let's just get right into it. So I want to start off by addressing something, because this is a problem that a lot of people have with this game. It's how attacks don't carry over once an enemy has been defeated. So if you have Isaac and Garrett attack a single enemy and Isaac kills first, Garrett will defend instead of going after the next target, effectively wasting your turn. And I feel kind of weird for saying this, but I actually like this a lot. And this is a gripe that a lot of people have with turn-based combat, is that you're essentially just mashing one button over and over again until you win. Golden Sun doesn't do anything like that, because this game actually wants you to think about what you're doing. Who's going to attack what? What's his character's speed stat like? Oh, this person has a really strong weapon, so maybe I should attack this one target with this character. Every single time I'm in a battle, I am having these thoughts, which means that, just like when it comes to this game's dungeons, I'm always focused. This game always has my attention. I'm always planning my next move, and it gets to a point where we can get a really good rhythm going. I mean, yeah, sure, it's turn-based, but damn, it's rewarding when you execute your plan perfectly. It also helps that the attacks in this game are just They're fucking nuts, dude. Like, you got the camera moving around and shifting and moving on, like, this 3D plane, and for the powerful attacks, the camera just kind of, like, creeps along, like, flexing its giant sprites and particle effects at you. Like, talking about the presentation again, like, these battles are stunning, and it helps, too, that these battles are fast-paced. Like, when you get a random encounter, the screen flashes, and boom, you're in. Make your call. The fast pace, the snappy animations, the over-the-top particle effects, the satisfying sound design, like every attack has so much impact and crunch to them. Again, people can rag on turn-based combat all they want, but this game shows how it's done. You can also find these rare weapons that pretty much have like a secondary attack. Now it's random, but when a weapon lets out a howl, it can cause status ailments or have elemental damage. These make up the best weapons in the game, and they also provide some of the coolest and deadliest attacks. On the note of status ailments, most of the bosses in this game are vulnerable to them. Like, thank God. Like, I've always hated how, in some games, bosses have that immune status. You know, it's like, what's the point of giving me, like, a really powerful sleep spell if I can't use it on a boss? Bosses in this game could be put to sleep, they could be stunned, you can steal their synergy, all that stuff. They play by the same rules that you do, which makes these bosses fair. Of course, now, just because they're fair doesn't mean that they're a walk in the park, either. Golden Sun isn't a super challenging game, but it can be easy to slip up. And once when you do, the game will punish you for it. None of the bosses have like cheap attacks and they don't come out of nowhere, you know, like there's build up to them and that is appreciated, especially after coming from Beyond the Beyond where, you know, after like the first, what was it, like 12 hours or something like that, you fight the bosses now and some of them just kind of come out of nowhere. So I'm glad to see that Camelot learned that lesson. Something else I found to be quite impressive is your actual party. Now I know it doesn't sound like a huge deal seeing how you only have 4 members in your party, but each character has a purpose for being there. Like each one has a function. There's a lot of JRPGs out there where you get a whole bunch of characters, but the game will only ever let you use like 3 at a time or something. And I never understood this. Like, it just makes it feel like as if the majority of the characters that you get never get any use, you know? Like, once when I found my A team, I don't feel compelled to try out some of the other characters. Now, that's a me problem. Like, I'm not denying that. But having 4 dedicated members in your party means that every character is going to have some sort of use. Each one has a role. So, for example, you have Isaac and Garrett. These 2 are going to be your hardest hitters. Garrett hits a lot harder than Isaac, but base Isaac learns healing synergy, and even towards the later parts of the game, he'll learn synergy that can revive fallen party members. Mia has synergy that can remove status ailments that can heal the entire party, and Ivan can learn a number of spells that can increase their stats for a short while. Do you see what I mean? Like how every member of your party has a function. Each one has a role that makes them feel valuable. And that's not even taking into account what they can do with their Jin or with their different classes. Since we're getting closer to the end of the video, I want to talk about one more positive and one more negative with this game. One of the things that I love the most about Golden Sun is that it knows exactly what it is. It's a JRPG on a handheld device. There's a number of quality of life features here, like how if your party gets wiped out, you get brought back to the most recent town that you've been in, instead of having a game over and having to restart from the last checkpoint. Since you're going to be using a lot of synergy, you can replenish your lost points by either finding a synergy stone for a max refill, or you can gradually refill it by walking around. You can assign synergy to these shoulder buttons for a quick use. You can buy, equip, and sell gear in one fell swoop, and a big one for me personally is that you can save at any point in the game. Camelot knew that having a lot of the weird design from older JRPGs would piss people off when they're playing this either on the go or in short bursts, so they don't waste your time with any of that nonsense. It also helps that this game is fairly short. My first runtime was roughly around like 21 hours or so, but my fastest time was 9 hours total with all of the Jin. And this time, I decided to comb through the game and take my time with it, and I still ended up at like 15 hours. Golden Sun is a very beginner-friendly JRPG in that sense. The mechanics are easy to learn and have a lot of depth to them if you want to experiment. The bosses provide a challenging but fair fight. The random encounters might be a turnoff for some, but they are disabled in the more puzzle-heavy areas, and the battles are fast enough for me to not ever be bothered by them. It's a short and sweet adventure that I've come back to time and time again, and if people are trying to get into the genre, this is always the first game that I'd recommend to them. I mean, you got this game, you got Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy IV is also a really good game if you're starting out on JRPGs, like those, but you know, that's not here or there. But alas, there's one more issue that I have with this game, and sadly enough, it's this game's ending. Now, the ending doesn't offend. You know what I mean? I gotta make that perfectly clear. It just kind of stops, I guess. Like, Felix and Jenna are nowhere to be found, so we set up to the open ocean to go find them, and that's it! Roll credits! Like, it's also weird how the 4 elemental lighthouses are like this big deal, but we only ever get to see 2 of them in this game, and more so than that, we don't even learn what this Golden Sun thing is. Like, you'd think it'd be important considering that's the name of the game, but we won't find out about that until the second game, and that's a game that I won't be covering today. Yeah, I admittedly really wanted to go big or go home with this video. See, the original idea for this one was that I was supposed to look at both this game and The Lost Age as one big game, as in how the game was originally designed, but much like Camelot when making this game, that project ended up being way too big, and I really don't like to hit that hour mark. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to make content that's too long, for one. Two, this project would have taken, like, way longer than it should have. And three, I also got that 3D Zelda retrospective, and I know people have been waiting for it. Plus, that way, when I do get around to covering the Lost Stage, I can give it all the time of the sun that it needs, because that game is kind of a beefcake. Honestly, I just hope that I was able to do this game justice. Golden Sun is a game that I hold very near and dear to me, and part of the reason why I love this game, as weird as this may sound, is because of the community around it. Now, sure, there are bad apples here, like in any community, but this one I think is actually pretty special. Golden Sun fans are some of the most passionate and optimistic people out there, and I'm not gonna lie, like, a lot of that optimism is contagious, you know? Like, when the Grinch leak happened for Smash Ultimate back in 2018, Isaac was one of those characters in that leak, and at the time, there weren't a lot of people who were able to prove this leak false, so it really did look like our Golden Sun was going to be in, but instead, he was an assist trophy, and to make matters worse, we got another Pokemon rep, and by far the worst Mario rep. Like, yeah, that's great. You know, we got two franchises that already don't have enough representation, right? And even now, like something more recent, we got those trademarks for Golden Sun that got approved, and it really did look like as if it was pointing towards Camelot making a new Golden Sun game or a remake or something, but instead, we got another Mario sports game. So, yeah, being a Golden Sun fan right now isn't exactly the greatest feeling, especially since fans have been waiting almost 11 years for a new game, and we've gotten nothing other than a quote from Hiroyuki Takahashi from 2012. So, yeah, not great, but the fans are still holding on to something. They're hopeful and optimistic that Golden Sun will return. Like, I've even talked to a number of people, despite all that's happened, that speak with 100% confidence that Golden Sun is coming back. Like, shit, I wish I had that confidence. I will always be hopeful that Golden Sun will come back, but if you were to ask me, I personally think that if they wanted to, they would have already made a new game, so we probably won't get an RPG from Camelot anytime soon, but honestly, anything can happen. I mean, the first Shining Force game got a remake on the Game Boy Advance, and that wasn't done by Camelot, so hey, who knows? Something else too that's a bit more recent is that the Pokemon remakes aren't being developed by Game Freak, so it shows us that Nintendo is open to handing off these remake projects to other developers, so maybe something like a Golden Sun remake by Grezzo isn't too out of the question. Until then, I've got 3 great games from this series for myself to enjoy. Oh, yeah, I did say 3 by the way. Dark Dawn happened. Deal with it.